A shivering 10-year-old boy knocked on the door of a stranger one rainy night, bruised, silent, and terrified. The woman who opened that door, she changed his life forever. And decades later, he changed hers in a way the world would never forget. In a quiet corner of Georgia, there was a small, worn house at the end of Willow Street. The porch creaked, the windows fogged from years of cooking and laughter, and the smell of baked cornbread always floated out like a welcome sign. This was Mama Joe's house. She wasn't rich, she wasn't famous, she didn't have any fancy degrees or new cars, but Mama Joe had something more powerful than all of that: love, real love. The kind that feeds your spirit before it feeds your stomach. The kind that never asks who you are or what you've done. It just welcomes you. People in the neighborhood called her many things: the porch saint, the soup lady, but most just called her Mama, because that's what she was. Even if you weren't related, she made you feel like family. Her voice was warm, her smile gentle, her hands a little tired but still full of life. Mama Joe was 72 now. Her children had moved far away. Her husband had passed long ago, but she never let loneliness take root. Her door stayed open, her table stayed full, and her heart, that never ran out of room. That day had started like any other. She was in her kitchen, humming a soft gospel tune as she stirred a pot of gumbo. The smell of smoked sausage and okra filled the room. Outside, rain tapped gently on the roof. A dog barked once and then fell quiet. The world felt slow, safe, soft. She had just pulled a golden skillet of cornbread from the oven when she heard it. A knock, quiet, hesitant, almost afraid to be heard. Mama Joe paused. Few people came by this late. She wiped her hands on her apron. Her heart didn't race, but it listened. Because women like Mama Joe had learned, sometimes danger doesn't come with noise. Sometimes it whispers. She opened the door. There stood a boy, 10 years old maybe, soaked from the rain, shivering not just from the cold, but from something deeper. His clothes were too thin, his eyes tired, his face marked by small bruises, the kind that don't come from playground accidents, the kind that speak of pain and fear. He looked up at her, and with a voice barely louder than the rain behind him, he whispered 4 words. "Please don't make me go." Mama Joe didn't ask questions. She didn't look for explanations. She didn't turn him away. She simply reached out her hand, like she'd done so many times before, and said without words, "You're safe now." She let him in, closed the door, and with that quiet click, a new chapter began. For him, for her, for both. The boy stood silently in the doorway, water dripping from his clothes onto the floor, his arms still crossed tight across his chest, like a shield. His eyes flicked around the room, alert, scared, unsure if this was truly a place of peace. Mama Joe didn't rush him. She walked to the stove, ladled hot gumbo into a wide bowl, pulled a clean towel from the drawer, and gently placed it on the table. She added a slice of cornbread, still warm, still soft, and then stepped back. She didn't force him to sit, she just waited. After a moment, the boy stepped forward, like a stray dog testing trust. He picked up the spoon with trembling hands, took one bite, then another, faster now, as if each mouthful was more than food, as if it was healing. He didn't speak, but his body did. His shoulders softened, his breathing slowed. The walls he'd built began to crack. Mama Joe watched quietly. She knew those bruises told a story he couldn't say out loud. She'd seen it before, the silence, the fear, the small broken signs of a child who had run too far, for too long. When he finished, he looked up. His eyes met hers, and though he didn't say the words, she heard the question in his gaze. "Am I safe here?" She nodded, then gently asked, "You got a name, baby?" He hesitated, then whispered, "Nathan." Mama Joe smiled. "That's a strong name, strong like roots." His voice cracked. "Please don't call nobody, I'll be good, I can't go back." And there it was, the truth behind the silence. Mama Joe reached into a drawer, pulled out a blanket, wrapped it around his shoulders. "I ain't sending you back, sugar, not tonight. Not ever to danger, but I do have to call someone who can help. The right way. You're safe here. Till then. You hear me?" Nathan's lip trembled. One tear slipped down his cheek. Mama Joe wiped it away, not with a rush, but with the care of a mother tucking in her child. And in that small kitchen, under the soft glow of a flickering light, something sacred began to grow. A bond, a promise, a new kind of family. That night, while the rain whispered against the windows and the old wall clock ticked softly, Mama Joe stayed awake. She sat in her favorite armchair, watching Nathan sleep. He was curled up on her couch, wrapped in the faded Afghan blanket, breathing slow, peaceful for the first time in who knows how long. The soup bowl sat empty on the table beside him. But his heart? That was fuller than it had been in a very long time. Mama Joe didn't sleep. She didn't even try. She just kept her eyes on that small, sleeping figure, like a mother watches over a child on their first night home, quiet, steady, protective. Outside, the wind brushed past the house, but inside, everything felt still, safe, sacred. The hours passed. And when morning came, it brought with it a soft knock at the door. Not loud, not urgent, just calm. Exactly how Mama Joe had asked for it to be. She opened the door to find a woman standing there, mid-40s, hair pulled back, clipboard in hand, eyes clear and kind. She introduced herself as Mrs. Raymond, a caseworker from the Department of Family and Children's Services. She spoke in gentle tones, respectful ones, and Mama Joe appreciated that. They sat in the kitchen, just out of Nathan's earshot, drinking coffee, sharing truths, hard ones. Mama Joe told her everything, the bruises, the way Nathan flinched at kindness, the fear behind his silence. Mrs. Raymond nodded slowly, scribbling notes with her pencil. "He's run before," she murmured quietly. "But this time, someone actually opened the door." When it was time to wake him, Mama Joe did it herself. She walked to the couch, sat beside him, and laid a hand softly on his shoulder. "Nathan," she whispered, like a lullaby in reverse. He stirred, eyes blinking open fast, like he was expecting to be dragged out, yelled at, sent away. But then he saw her face, and the fear faded, not completely, but enough to breathe again. "Nathan, baby," she said, voice warm and low. "There's a kind lady here. She wants to help. She's not going to hurt you. But we do need to talk about what happens next." He sat up, arms wrapped tight around his knees. He didn't look at Mrs. Raymond, just at Mama Joe. "Do I have to leave?" he asked. Quiet, defeated, not angry, just bracing for heartbreak. Mama Joe reached for his hand. Her fingers traced slow circles across his knuckles. "Not right now, and not back where you came from. That's never going to happen again. You hear me?" Mrs. Raymond knelt beside them. Her tone was professional, but her eyes were soft. "Nathan, we're going to find a safe place for you, a foster home where you'll be cared for. But for the next few days, if it's all right with Miss Josephine, you can stay here, just while we work everything out." Mama Joe didn't even hesitate. "He's got a room already," she said firmly. She didn't mention that the room hadn't been touched in years, that it still held her nephew's old baseball posters and a bed she hadn't made in months. All she said was, "I've got groceries for a week. I don't need a government check. I just need to know this boy is safe." Nathan blinked, like hope was something too big to understand all at once. Mama Joe helped him off the couch and led him to the spare room. The walls were soft yellow. The bed still smelled like lavender soap. She told him, "You can unpack your heart here, baby, one piece at a time." Later that morning they went shopping, not for toys. Mama Joe didn't spoil, but for socks without holes, a toothbrush that was his alone, and a second-hand denim jacket he picked himself, grinning just a little. The kind of grin that barely counted as a smile, but meant everything. Over the next few days, the healing didn't happen all at once. Nathan had nightmares. He clenched his fists when strangers moved too fast. Some days he forgot to speak. But each time he broke, Mama Joe was there to gather the pieces. She taught him how to stir roux without burning it, how to shell peas with patience, how to read the wind by the way the trees swayed outside. And in return, Nathan began to trust, not with words, but with actions. The way he set the table without being asked, the way he leaned his head against her shoulder during Sunday gospel hour, and when Mrs. Raymond came back with news of an available foster home. Nathan didn't cry, but his hands shook as he packed his things. Nathan packed slowly, a few clothes, the book Mama Jo had given him, and the small notebook she'd tucked under his pillow that first night. Inside, on the very first page, in her soft, looping handwriting, were the words, "You are seen. You are safe. You are somebody." He held it tightly, like a treasure. His backpack was slung over one shoulder, and he stood by the front door, staring at the steps outside. "Will I see you again?" he asked. His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't hopeful. It was small, like he was afraid to even ask the question. Mama Jo, 72 years old, still standing like a mountain, cupped his cheek in her hand and looked him straight in the eyes. "You will, baby," she said gently. "I'll be right here, and you come back when you're ready. This door don't close on people who need love." He nodded, lips pressed tight. And then he turned and walked away, following Mrs. Raymond down the sidewalk, one step at a time. Mama Jo watched from the doorway, her hand resting softly on the frame. She didn't cry. She didn't wave. She just stood there, holding space, holding hope. The house fell quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. This one echoed. It echoed with memory, of footsteps on hardwood, of silverware clinking against a bowl, of a boy whispering his name like he was learning it for the first time. She returned to her routines, up before sunrise, biscuits in the oven by 7, gospel humming in the background. She tended her garden, folded clothes, wrote letters to grandbabies she hadn't seen in years. But something inside had shifted. She could feel it in the silence. Meanwhile, Nathan's world was changing too. The foster home was fine, neat, clean, no shouting, no fists. But it wasn't Mama Jo's. It didn't smell like cornbread or gumbo. It didn't feel like a hug when you walked in. His new guardians were polite. They meant well. But they didn't look at him the way she had. They didn't speak his name like it mattered. At school, he kept to himself. Other kids called him names, said he was weird, too quiet, too serious. But he didn't fight back. He just opened that little notebook every morning and read her words. "You are seen. You are safe. You are somebody." Those words, they steadied him. Middle school was hard. But something changed when he joined the debate team. His voice, the one he used to keep hidden, began to grow strong. He learned that words could be armor, that logic could be power, that speaking your truth didn't mean yelling, it just meant standing. By high school, he was winning, debate trophies, scholarships, respect. He graduated at the top of his class, and he never forgot the night it all began, on a porch in Georgia, with a bowl of soup and a woman who believed in him before he knew how to believe in himself. Nathan went on to college, then law school. He clerked for judges, volunteered to help kids like he once was, the broken, the afraid, the ones the world forgot. And through it all, he kept Mama Jo's notebook, the paper worn soft, the ink fading, but the message clear as ever. You are somebody. Back in Georgia, Mama Jo was growing older, slower, her joints ached, her steps were shorter. But her spirit, still fierce, still bright. Teenagers still came to her for advice, children still knocked for cookies and hugs. She never locked her door, never turned anyone away. And though she didn't know it yet, her name was already being spoken in places she'd never been. In classrooms, in courtrooms, in whispered stories from a young man rising through the world. She had planted something powerful, and it was blooming. It was a clear spring morning when Mama Jo noticed the envelope. Thick, cream-colored, no return address. Just her name, written in handwriting she hadn't seen in years but would recognize even in the dark. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. At the top, embossed in deep blue ink, were the words, United States District Court. She paused. Her breath caught. Below it, a letter, short, but full of something heavy, something holy. Dearest Mama Jo, Tomorrow I'm being sworn in as a federal judge. There will be cameras, speeches, reporters. I've been asked to tell my story, to explain how I got here, and I will. But I needed you to have these words first, because none of this, not the title, the robe, the courtroom, means anything without you. You saw me when I was invisible. You fed me when I was starving for more than food. You gave me a name worth answering to. You are the reason I am not just alive, but standing. And when they ask me who built me, I will say your name. I love you. Always have, always will. Always. Your son, Nathan. The letter slipped from her hands and landed softly on the table. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just looked out the window, tears quietly slipping down her cheeks. Her heart didn't feel heavy. It felt full. So full it could barely hold the joy pressing against it. She didn't need applause or parades. She didn't need headlines. That letter was everything. But that wasn't the end. Later that evening, her neighbor's son, Jamal, knocked on the door, holding a laptop under his arm. "You gotta see this, Miss Joe," he said, smiling wide. "It's on the news. Online, too." He set the laptop on the coffee table and pulled up the live stream replay. Mama Joe sat straight in her chair, hands folded in her lap. The screen flickered, then showed the seal of the United States District Court. Then, Nathan appeared, tall, strong, dressed in his black judge's robe, his voice calm, confident, steady. He began his speech with the usual acknowledgments, formalities. But then, he looked up, and he said her name. He told them everything. About a little boy who knocked on a stranger's door in the rain. A boy who was scared, bruised, and tired. A boy who found not judgment, but gumbo and kindness. Who was given safety without questions, and love without rules. He said, "Her name is Josephine Bellamy." Mama Joe to everyone who knew her. And the courtroom, full of lawyers and dignitaries, fell completely silent. Nathan's voice didn't tremble. "She didn't save my life once. She saved it every day after. She reminded me that I mattered, that I was somebody." He looked straight into the camera. "For me, justice didn't begin in law school. It began with a 72-year-old woman's hands stirring a pot of gumbo. That's where I first saw dignity. That's where I first felt seen." The camera caught people in the audience blinking back tears. But Mama Joe, she just sat quietly. Her hand rested on her chest, as if holding in a feeling too large for words. Jamal sniffled. "You're famous now, Miss Joe." She smiled, that soft, knowing smile. "Baby," she whispered, "I've been famous, to the only heart that ever mattered." The next morning, before the dew had dried from the grass, a sleek black car pulled up to her driveway. It didn't honk, it didn't roar, it simply arrived. And out stepped Nathan, grayer at the temples now, but still Nathan, still her boy. He walked up the porch steps without a word, opened the screen door, and wrapped his arms around her, like he was holding onto the earth itself. "I came home," he whispered into her shoulder, "not to visit, to stay. If you'll have me, I want to take care of you now." Mama Joe leaned back, looked into his eyes, and smiled. "Took you long enough, baby." One evening, the sky was soft with pink and gold, the way it gets right before dusk settles in. Mama Joe sat on her porch rocker, wrapped in the same quilt she had sewn many years ago, her head tilted slightly as if listening to something only her heart could hear. The jasmine outside her window had started blooming early that year, and its sweet scent drifted through the open window like a memory returning home. Nathan sat beside her, quiet, still, every movement gentle, careful. His hand found hers, and he held it, feeling how time had softened her skin, how age had slowed her breath, but not her spirit, never her spirit. He didn't speak at first. He just watched her, memorizing her smile, the silver streaks in her hair, the way her chest rose and fell like a lullaby wrapped in peace. Then, finally, with a voice full of ache and love, he said, "Mama, I've been thinking." She opened her eyes and turned her head slightly. Her gaze was calm, knowing. Nathan took a breath. "It's not enough for me to visit. Not anymore. I know I'm grown. I know I've built a life, but I want you to be my mother, not just in my heart, in name, in everything." Her eyes shimmered, not with surprise, but with something deeper, recognition, gratitude. She squeezed his hand. "You always were my son," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the creak of the porch floorboards. "From the moment you knocked, baby." Nathan leaned forward and kissed her forehead. That kiss was a seal, not of ceremony, but of truth. That night, under the same roof where their story had begun, Nathan filed the paperwork. He didn't do it for appearances. He didn't need to prove anything, but he did it anyway, to honor her, to make official what had always been real. Josephine Bellamy, now his mother by choice, his forever family. From that day forward, he called her Mama without hesitation, without pause, without explanation, just love, simple, quiet love. She didn't need the legal title, but she accepted it like a crown. And Nathan, he took his place beside her, not as the boy she once saved, but as the man she helped raise, the man who stood tall because she never let him fall. They cooked together again. She showed him how to get the roux just right, deep brown but not burnt. He read to her when her eyes got tired, helped her up the porch steps, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders when the breeze picked up. They didn't talk about the past much. They didn't need to. It lived in the quiet, in the way he refilled her coffee without being asked, in the way she hummed when he entered the room, in the way they smiled without words, two souls forever connected. And the porch? That little old porch on Willow Street? It stayed open. Neighbors still stopped by. Kids still ran up the steps. And Mama Jo, though slower now, still had that light in her eyes. That light that said, "This is home." Time moved gently, and in every passing hour, Nathan stayed. Because when she opened her door all those years ago, she didn't just save a boy. She made a promise. And now that boy had come back to keep it. The seasons turned quietly, as they always did on Willow Street. The garden outside grew slower now. The cornbread baked less often. But the warmth inside Mama Jo's home never faded. It had changed shape, yes, grown deeper, softer, like old songs sung a little slower but with more meaning. One afternoon, just as the jasmine began to bloom again, Nathan found her resting in her rocker, the same chair she had sat in the night he arrived, so many years ago. She was wrapped in her quilt, her eyes closed, her face calm. He sat beside her, not saying a word, just watching, listening. Her breathing was light, each breath slower than the one before. Her hands folded gently in her lap. Peace surrounded her like sunlight. No fear, no pain, just rest. Nathan took her hand. It felt smaller now, fragile, but still full of the same fire it always held. He leaned in and whispered, "I'm here, Mama. You're not alone." She stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and when they met his, they didn't show surprise, only peace. "I know, baby," she whispered. "I've always known." He sat with her as the sun dipped low behind the rooftops, as the day exhaled into evening, as time slowed one more time for just them. She smiled, and then, as gentle as the rain that once fell the night he arrived. Mama Jo let go. There were no final words, no grand speeches, just a quiet breath and a love that lingered in the air. In the days that followed, neighbors filled the porch with flowers. Children drew pictures of Mama Jo with wide smiles and big hearts. Strangers from out of town came by, whispering thanks. Some who had heard the story from Nathan's courtroom speech, others who had once knocked on that very door and found comfort inside. But it was Nathan who stood by her rocker every morning. He didn't cry loudly. He didn't hide either. He just stood in the light and remembered. He remembered a woman who saw a broken boy and didn't flinch, a woman who turned her kitchen into a haven, who stirred gumbo with one hand and held the world together with the other. He remembered her notebook, her voice, her kindness. And on the day of her service, he stood before the crowd, tall, steady, just as she taught him, and read the words she once wrote to him. "You are seen, you are safe, you are somebody." He paused, then looked up. "And because of Mama Jo, I believed it. The crowd fell silent. No one moved, because they knew. They weren't just saying goodbye to a woman. They were honoring a legend, a quiet one, a gentle one. But a legend, still. After everyone left, Nathan sat alone on the porch. The wind played softly with the chimes above. The scent of jasmine lingered in the air. He looked at the front door, still open, still waiting, and he whispered, "Thank you, Mama." Because love like hers doesn't fade. It echoes, in courtrooms, in kitchens, in the hearts of every child who thinks they're invisible, until someone like Mama Joe sees them. And now it was his turn, to be the porch, to be the welcome, to be the voice that says, "You're safe now," because that's what legacy is. It's not marble, not medals. It's a chipped bowl of soup, an open door, and a voice that tells the forgotten, "You matter." And just like that, Mama Joe lived on,